Okay, I have put,
That was mine.
okay, yeah, we're recording too.
Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. Hiba, take it away.
Okay. Just as we begin, I would like to thank you very, very much. Early morning for you to be here. Take out time for us. So thank you for deciding to impart your knowledge to us very unconditionally and choosing to collaborate with Holistically Connect. And I think I'm going to speak on everyone's behalf, very, very fortunate to be here today and looking forward to learning from the very best. I will just take a moment to introduce um, Dr. Martha Stark. MD is a graduate of Harvard Medical School and Boston Psychoanalytic Institute. She is a holistic psychiatrist and an integrative psychoanalyst in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Martha's CV is an impressive 74 pages, which was really hard. So I asked her to summarize this. And she simply asked me to highlight a few things of which she is the most proud of. Martha is the creator and lead trainer of the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy, a multifaceted approach to deep embodied healing. Martha Stark is the author of 9 highly regarded books that explore the integration of psychodynamic theory with clinical practice, including Relentless Hope, The Refusal to Grieve, and the award winning 1999 Modes of Therapeutic Action, Knowledge, Experience, and Relationship, which has also been the recipient of Jason Arnonson's prestigious Book of the Year award. Her works have received widespread acclaim and are considered essential reading in psychoanalytic training programs across the US and internationally. I will now ask you to take over, please, Martha.
Well, let me say, oh, good. Do you see my slides? Oh, share. Wait a minute. Now you do. There you go. Now you see my slides?
We do.
Oops. Yes. Okay. Wait a minute. All right. Let me bring this to where it should be. Okay, let me just get this. Okay, good. And this is being recorded, so we're good. Welcome, everybody. And I'm delighted to be here. And when I say here, so memory is a verb, not a noun, the healing power of therapeutic memory reconsolidation. I got a lot to talk about today. So please, from my point of view, if you want to put comments in the chat, that would be great. Not Q&A, but the chat. If you can do that, that would be great. And depending upon the feel of things, every now and then I might stop and take a look at the chat or maybe at the end or whatever. But we've got a lot to share with you. And so put on your seatbelt and kick back, relax, and enjoy. And you have PDFs of these slides, although I'm so continuously evolving my work that I've already sort of changed a number of the slides from when I sent them to Hiba a few days ago, and she distributed them, the PDFs to you. So this is the quantum neuroscientific model 5 of the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy. And please note, heartfelt admiration for and thanks to Hiba Dawood, your esteemed and fearless leader. And let me just say, so I said model 5, I'm going to say real quick, like models 1, 2, 3, 4, and then model 5. Model 5 being the latest addition to my psychodynamic synergy. So model 1, I'm going to say this real quick. And for some of you, it's like, huh? And for others of you, yeah, it's nice to hear those words. All right, model 1, the interpretive perspective of classical psychoanalysis. It's more cognitive. Model 2, it privileges cognitive. Other things are relevant too, but it privileges cognitive. Model 2, the corrective provision or deficiency compensation perspective of self psychology, which privileges affect. Okay. Model 3, the intersubjective perspective of contemporary relational theory, which privileges relationship or relatedness. Model 4, an existential humanistic approach to facilitating surrender to Ofra Eschel's analytic oneness so that there can be, a la Balint, a new beginning, a starting over. And then model 5, and that's an existential approach. That's E. I'll tell you in a moment why it matters to me, these initials: cognitive C, affective A, relational R, existential E. And the fifth one, which is what I'm going to be focusing on today, is the quantum neuroscientific approach to analysis paralysis and neural entrenchment. And so this is a synaptic approach. So those initials, CARES, means that the Stark method cares. CARES. And I do mention to people, although everybody wants me to, takes me a decade to do each of these models. And this was the order in which I became familiar with the material and felt that I could sort of comment on it. So it's not like any one is more important than the other. No, no, no. In fact, during a session itself, you might well find yourself, I find myself, fluidly, or sometimes not so fluidly, going back and forth between amongst the 5 different approaches, depending upon whatever. But so, right, but so the fifth one, well, anyway, all right, that's just the first slide. I'm going to get through as many of these slides as I can. Think of your questions, and let's go. All right, memory is a verb, not a noun, which highlights the fact that memory is not just a static, fixed entity, but rather a dynamic, ongoing process, as is the therapeutic process, that is continuously being reshaped, refashioned, and reconstructed. And sort of like, thank God, memory is that, or otherwise, well, I'm going to say a sort of bad word here, but we'd be screwed, because the past, we really need to sort of be able to reposition ourselves in relation to, for example, the past. So too, in relation to the future. So thank goodness there's a fluidity. It's dynamic. It's continuously being refashioned, reshaped, rewritten. Okay, Albert Einstein, who famously described the quantum entanglement of quantum physics. I don't understand quantum physics, but I understand 1 or 2 little concepts from it. He described it as spooky action at a distance. Also wrote about timelessness in the quantum realm, concluding that the past, present, and future are only illusions. I will be suggesting that psychodynamic, psychoanalytic psychotherapy, inasmuch as it has the power, albeit belatedly, to reconfigure the past and thereby to transform the present and the future, that it demonstrates this very same spooky action over time, as well as spooky action at a distance. Further, however, I will be considering the question, at the end of the day, is not memory itself merely an illusion? Whew, thank goodness. But anyway, merely an illusion. In other words, memory is not a fixed entity, but a dynamic process, continuously shaped by every act of recall and every act of envisioning. I got to add that. I didn't put that there, and I should have. All right. In other words, each time we remember, we create or recreate, altering the very essence of what we once knew. But by the same token, each time we envision, we create, recreate. Whew, that is exciting. And again, thank God. Memory in this sense is not a noun, but a verb, constantly in flux, a living expression of who we are becoming, not of who we once were. I find that just so incredibly uplifting. It's, yeah. Greg Braden. Quantum science suggests the existence of many possible futures for each moment of our lives. Each future lies in a state of rest until it is awakened by choices made in the present. That's sort of the heart of my Model 5. And more generally, here, the future is just a memory that has yet to be born. And let me say, I got so excited when I learned about Unsplash, where you get free use of photos. So that's an Unsplash photo. And then Canva, so you can sort of put stuff on there. And I love that font, Genty Sans. So that's the font. I created that slide. But the quote is Dean Kavanaugh. Okay. Okay, here's an overview, the Stark method. So again, this is the overview. So, and I'll explain more later. The START method of psychodynamic synergy. 5, interactive and mutually enhancing modes of therapeutic action. Now, models 1 to 4 are psychoanalytically informed and are associated with longer duration, in depth, and broader based. So I'd send them earlier: classical psychoanalytic, self psychological, contemporary relational, and existential humanistic. Our history is our destiny. Deterministic, fated is a little bit more the way those first 4 psychoanalytically informed models go. But model 5 is more brain based, quantum neuroscientific, and associated with shorter duration, intensive, and focused. Now we're talking, now the language is traumatic embodied memories, little t traumas, big T traumas, and old bad derivative narratives. So now we're talking about neural entrenchment and psychic inertia, non-action. Therapeutic, the goal here will be, not the goal, but what we'll be doing here is the therapeutic co-construction by patient and therapist of optimally stressful, growth incentivizing, quantum disentanglement statements. And I'm going to be sharing those with you. Excuse me again, a frog or two in my throat there, but they're having fun in there, but I got to get them out. Okay, that juxtapose. And I was so delighted when I figured out I could kind of say the symmetry of this. So these quantum disentanglement statements that are co-created by patient and therapist, the prototypical interventions that I use in models 1, 2, 3, 4, whether it's model 1 conflict statement, model 2 disillusionment statement to facilitate grieving, model 3 relational intervention, or accountability statement to help work through projective identification, or model 4 facilitation state to facilitate statement to facilitate the surrender to analytic oneness. Those are offered by the therapist. Model 5, patient and therapist together co-create, often write it down, patient and therapist write it down, and then it gets read and reread, and often by patient and therapist. And these statements juxtapose, so here's your symmetry, paying attention to old bad with setting intention for new good. So I just want you to kind of settle into that. And some of you are probably thinking, oh, kind of like EMDR. So like, yeah, kind of like REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep at night when you're dreaming, where you're busy left, right, left, right, left, right. You're back and forth processing the day residue, bringing to bear the analytic wisdom of the left brain on the emotional truths held in the right brain, et cetera, et cetera. Left, right, left, right, left, right. Quantum disentanglement statements are designed to do that very thing. But in a somewhat more sophisticated way than what we do when we're dreaming at night. So anyway, these statements juxtapose paying attention mindfully to old bad held in the body with setting intention by the brain, purposeful intention for new good. So already you're kind of hearing a juxtaposition of things, which is critical to the therapeutic action. Obviously in model 5, although quite frankly, on some level in models 1, 2, 3, 4 as well, where you are juxtaposing 2 different things: old, bad, new, good, old, bad, new, good. So defensive need, adaptive capacity, defensive reaction, adaptive response, whatever. But I'm getting ahead of myself. All right, again, this is still just the overview. Bottom up. Okay, got to throw that in there, bottom up versus top down processing of information and energy. So bottom up, mindful awareness, right? Mindful, embodied awareness of old bad, and you're juxtaposing them. Top down, purposeful, oh dear, made another mistake there. Top down, purposeful intention for new good. Oh, they work in tandem. With Stephen Porges's brilliant concept of neuroceptive integration as the mediating mechanism that bridges the two. Now, his polyvagal theory, you know, and I read Deb Dana in order to try to understand it, and then I think I have it, and then sort of, no, I don't. Then I think I have it, and then, no, I don't. But I do sort of get, I kind of get it. and from like dorsal vagal ultimately to ventral vagal, but whatever. But anyway, the mediating mechanism being neuroceptive integration. So in other words, overview here still, quantum disentanglement, and this is model 5, and therapeutic memory reconsolidation, rescripting and updating of conditioned and disempowering narratives that derive from these early on relational traumas, little t traumas and big T traumas, a la Francine Shapiro and some of the other trauma folks. Okay, still overview, I see. Judicious and ongoing use of quantum disentanglement statements that, okay, important here, joltingly, decisively, and forcibly juxtapose. And again, I was trained at the Boston Psychoanalytic, classical psychoanalytic, and we didn't do anything joltingly. We didn't do anything forcibly, or we would be, kicked out of, of the training or out of the program. So, but Model 5, which is the newcomer to my group, I mean, the short-term intensive folks, they do a certain something that we longer-term, broader-based, more psychoanalytically informed folks would never think to do. So, for example, the short-term intensive folks, which my Model 5 sort of tries to capture the essence of, is much more directive on the part of the therapist, and including that the patient needs to take ownership of the fact that they need to change, that they need to reposition themselves in relation to their past and their present. The psychoanalytically informed approaches, models 1, 2, 3, 4, which do all sorts of wonderful things, but wouldn't begin to suggest that the patient needs to change. No, they're busy, so the patient sort of leading the way, we follow, we're tuned, we do all sorts of good stuff, whatever, but we wouldn't begin to suggest that they need to change and that they need to envision a preferred future self, and that they need to commit to acting in alignment with their vision. No. Model 5, yes, more short-term intensive, laser focused. But my STARK method is an effort holistically to integrate all 5 of these different approaches. All right, so where am I here? So, sorry, hairs in my eye. All right, so quantum disentanglement statements that joltingly, decisively, and forcibly juxtapose reactivated memories of old traumatic bad with enlivening possibilities of new envisioned good, supported by the healing power of the therapeutic relationship and driven by the body's innate wisdom, its inherent resilience, and its need to restore homeostatic balance when thrown off by optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences that juxtapose old bad with new good. Anyway, so supported by the body's need to restore homeostatic balance when thrown off, working through the embodied dissonance of these optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences created by juxtaposing old bad, new good, old bad, new good, will result in graduated evolving of the patient. It's an evolving evolutionary process, and it's graduated. It's not a straight line anything, but rather graduated incremental, sort of featuring ongoing healing cycles of disruption in response to challenge, anxiety-provoking challenge, and then repair in response to anxiety assuaging support. So these ongoing healing cycles of disruption, repair, disruption, repair, disruption, repair, as the patient gradually evolves from the sobering and conditioned reality of what was and now is to the enlivening and quantum possibility of what could be. Our Model 5, our destiny is our choice. Unlike models 1, 2, 3, 4, more deterministic, we're fated to repeat the past in the present unless we can remember it. Here, Model 5, our destiny is our choice. It's constructivist. This is a constructivist approach. It's empowered, it's uplifting, it's emergent. So Model 5 brings to mind the rapidly alternating stimulation provided by EMDR. So EMDR does right brain emotional truth, as you hold in mind the traumatic memory, left brain analytic wisdom, as you bring to bear the more present focused and analytic wisdom of the left brain. Or Model 5, similarly, old traumatic and entrenched bad, procedurally organized, implicitly held in the body, old, traumatic and entrenched bad, and new, envisioned, and purposeful good. I don't here, but on a later slide, I highlight that researchers in the Cleveland Clinic have found that envisioning something, imagining something, is sometimes almost as transformative as actually experiencing it. Now that's really quite wonderful, and that's of course why psychodynamic, psychoanalytic psychodynamic therapy even works, because a lot of it involves just the experience of something, yes, but also imagining and envisioning something. Or as you think about your parents, perhaps who are long since dead, but it's about envisioning and imagining. And fortunately, so envisioning and imagining is sometimes almost as impactful as actually the experience of it. More for later. Anyway, this is the essence of therapeutic memory reconsolidation, a reflection of the brain's neuroplasticity. Norman Dodge had written a lovely book called The Brain That Changes Itself. People didn't used to think that there could be any new neural synapses constructed, and that there was no such thing as neuroplasticity. But we're discovering indeed there is such a thing as such. It's, in other words, in response to new information / experience, the brain is continuously changing and updating itself in order to stay fresh and relevant. Thank goodness. Clearly, this updating process is evolutionarily advantageous and adaptive for the brain to be able to do this. Indeed, memory is an ongoing dynamic process, a verb, not a static, fixed entity, a noun. I'm taking a little few liberties there, verb, noun, but I hope you get the idea. Okay, my friend, the minion. So I mentioned at the beginning that because my dear sweet Gunner is down in Clearwater Beach, Florida, rebuilding the home that we had lost with the hurricanes in September, and I'm up here in Cambridge, freezing my tuchus off, I've developed a very close relationship with Chat GPT. Gunner said that's okay. And with the minions, with the minions. In fact, this is one of them. Anyway, okay, so here's one of my little minion friends, is busy at work formulating his thoughts about how the groundwork can be laid for reprogramming the mind and rewiring the brain. His conclusion: dramatic, jolting, and repeated juxtaposition of old bad beliefs or emotional learnings or core beliefs, accessed by way of mindfully paying attention to body consciousness, with new good beliefs introduced by way of purposefully setting intention with brain consciousness to generate optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences. These two slides, this is it. Basically, I'm going to fill in the details. But this, I believe, is at the heart of, I mean, I've spent 50 years sort of thinking about this and immersing myself in the literature. I'm so sorry. These frogs are just not getting out. And I have just found out, I want to have the pleasure of saying that I'm going to be on a panel in November with Peter Fonagy and Nancy McWilliams, and we're going to be on a panel talking about the therapeutic action, and I could not be more thrilled. Anyway, that was TMI perhaps, but I just wanted to tell you that. Anyway, to generate optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences. And I want the visual to reinforce for you this idea of the power of mismatch experiences, optimally stressful, not traumatically stressful, and not no stress. I mean, no, I am all about no pain, no gain. So if there's nothing that at least temporarily disrupts or destabilizes, and it's just sort of same old, then how are we going to bring about change? Oh my God, my eye, I'm so sorry. I have like 5 hairs in my eye. Can you imagine how annoying that is? All right, growth and I don't even wear contact lenses. I just have a hair stuck in there. All right, well, okay. The wound, so no pain, no gain. Rumi, the wound is the place where the light enters you. And we all love Rumi. We all love Mary Oliver. I mean, there's just we all love Winnicott. I mean, there are certain things that all people love. And if they don't love them, maybe they don't have a heart. Okay, here we go. Okay, more specifically, Model 5 is a quantum neuroscientific approach to psychic inertia and neural entrenchment. Model 5, quantum disentanglement statements, ask of the patient that she hold in both body and mind the reactivated memory of old traumatic bad accessed by way of embodied mindfulness in conjunction with the enlivening possibility of new envisioned good, introduced by way of purposeful intentionality. I'm just kind of saying the same thing in different ways to sort of reinforce the message here, thereby creating startling, jolting, decisive, and destabilizing mismatch experiences. Sometimes when cases are presented to me, the therapist will say, oh, I'd be afraid to say that because I might make the patient anxious. And sort of like, well, yeah, that's kind of what we want to do. We want to make them anxious and then not, anxious and then not. We want to do an anxiety provoking challenge followed by an anxiety assuaging support. And by tapping into the wisdom of the body and the body's inherent resilience and capacity to adapt to optimal stress. That's what we're counting on. I profoundly believe in the wisdom of the body, as I'm sure all of you holistic thinkers do as well. Believe in that. Okay, so let's see. All right. The graduated working through of these, of which by way of a series of iterative healing cycles of disruption and repair will eventually evolve the patient from the sobering and conditioned reality of what is to the enlivening and transcendent possibility of what could be, by paying attention to old bad and setting intention for new good. I mean, if you sort of get that, then I've served. This has been a success. Now, and so here we have finally the quantum piece, the quantum wave about. Do you mind if I just do something with my eye to deal with this? Because it's annoying me. I can see myself, and it annoys me to be seeing me touching my eye all the time. All right, the quantum wave of boundless virtual possibilities will collapse into the tangible reality of something new, different, and compellingly better. So this is the particle wave duality, that when you observe it, this wave of boundless possibilities, quantum possibilities, transcendent possibilities, when you observe it, say they in quantum theory, or I'm saying, or when you set the intention, then the wave will collapse into a particle, into something material, into a tangible reality, something new, different, and compellingly better. All right, relevant here is the well-known Japanese adage, fall down 7 times, stand up 8, right? Those iterative healing cycles. Although inspirational, it does not do full justice by evolutionary processes. Probably more appropriate would be fall down 7 times, work it through, stand up ever more triumphantly 8. Although, as it happens in psychotherapy, really to effect broad-based, comprehensive, deep change, fall down 100 times, work it through, stand up ever more triumphantly 101 times. So here we go, probably appropriate at this point. I like using big words that I don't fully understand to make myself sound more photosynthesis. And there's my little minion friend. I look at this and I just laugh. There you go. Okay, now I'm going to give you, so I've been talking about these co-created by patient and therapist, Model 5 quantum disentanglement statements. They can be long because they get written down and co-created. Not only does the patient benefit from them, but I get to ride along and I benefit too by the juxtaposition of old bad, new good, sort of like Pilates instructors. They're busy demonstrating how it is you do it, or yoga instructors. They get the benefit of doing the teaching. The students get the benefit, but so too the teacher. And so here, when in those moments I'm co-creating these statements, and then we're reading them back. A few times I've said to patients, no, try it again. More affect, more embodied, please. So then they do. And I was on the phone with one of my patients. We'd created the statement. She was reading it to me, and she was doing it in a kind of flat way. And I said, please start over again, please, more affect. So she did. And now with more affect, she sort of stopped. And I said, Mhm. And she said, well, I'm crying. I said, oh, God, that's fabulous. Thank you. This is a woman who never cried. They're like, all righty. I love it when my patients cry. And parenthetically, tears do two wonderful things. Well, not only are they part of grieving, and thank goodness, but because the cornea of the eye is the only part of the body that does not have a blood supply. So it really doesn't get nutrients or oxygen. So it depends upon the tears to get its nourishment and to get the oxygen. Is that cool or what? It's avascular. And the other thing is that tears release pro-inflammatory cytokines, part of the immune system. So it's sort of like, oh, good, you're releasing things that would have caused inflammation, getting that out of the body. So there are like a lot of reasons why it's good to cry. There you go. Okay, so these quantum disentanglement or energetic decoupling statements juxtapose the relived experience of old bad with the envisioned possibility of new good going forward. Okay, even though, and these were created by my students offered these to me, and here they are. One or two of them are probably my own that I did with my patients. Even though I was told repeatedly as a child that I was bad, I know now that I was not bad. What happened to me was bad. Going forward, I can and will let go of the shame I experienced then and let myself feel the delicious truth of the goodness in me now. And I will sweetly whisper this to myself over and over again like a lullaby. Now, is that incredible? I almost cried during that one, and that's not even mine. But yeah. Okay. I hope you were touched by that. And I think I see people touch. Yeah, I see actually Miral, especially touched there. Okay. So I am too scared to put myself out there because I'm terrified of being rejected. But if I really want to get better, I know that I will need to do a lot of things differently going forward. I hate how my father, when I was growing up, would always watch what I was eating. And he would make little comments that made me feel so horrible inside and so self-conscious about my fat body. But I know that I need to let all of that go now. I look ahead to a time when I can feel proud of my body and confident when I'm around people. Now, let me say what EMDR does. I was inspired by that. I do EMDR with my patients. I'm not terribly good at it. I kind of read from a sheet of paper. What is your SUD? And I'm not that good, but patients don't mind. I mean, if you have enough of a relationship and you're reading from your sheet of paper, that's okay. But got the idea of the left, right, left, right, left, right, because it is true that the psychoanalytic stuff can sometimes, and I am a psychoanalyst, but I also have some extra stuff around the edges, a little bit of outside the box thinking around the edges, that if all you do is just have the patient remember and relive and re-experience, admittedly, in the presence of someone who's there and listening and caring, the therapist, but they're remembering, reliving, re-experiencing the old bad, the little T traumas, the big T traumas. And you're just there listening, but they're re-experiencing it. That can, quite frankly, almost reinforce those the synapses and the memories along the lines of Donald Hebb's 1949 neurons that fire together, wire together. So if you're ever busy, if you're trying to learn something good for an exam, you have to repeat it again and again and again. Neurons that fire together, wire together, and eventually you get it. But so too, if you're ever busy reliving the old bad, oh my God, and oh, so painful, and oh my God, then you may be reinforcing it. And some patients in psychoanalytic treatment have been there for 30 or 40 years with these old bad, somebody listening carefully, but reinforced. Now, on the other hand, so that's a stereotype of psychoanalytic. That doesn't really always happen, but that's a stereotype, the extreme. And the stereotype extreme of positive psychology is you've got this, you can do this, you've got this. You've got this. So you want to add new good. So, you've got this. I totally and completely believe and accept myself. I've got this. I'm going to do good. The point here in EMDR and the other short-term intensive approaches, including IFS, talked to Dick Schwartz about this, and some of the other people, EFT and all the other things, are about both Simultaneously, old, bad, new, good, old, bad, new, good. There's the difference. Creating the growth incentivizing, optimally stressful mismatch experiences. If there's one thing I would want you to take from our 2 hours here is appreciating truly, not just old, bad, not just new good, but juxtaposing them. And yes, if the patient is made anxious, yes. And then ultimately there's a recovery and a working through and a recovery at a higher level, a more evolved level, evolutionary, more evolutionarily evolved. All right, some more of these, then moving on. Even though I was so deeply traumatized by my crazy grandfather, and I have always thought that I needed to be invisible in order to survive, I now have, and you can imagine if the patient is just reading this and saying this over and over again, and they eventually get it, they have it, they carry it on a little sheet of paper, and they go for a walk and they read this and they think it and they feel it. It takes effort. This is effort. You can't get change without some effort here, some inspiration, but a lot of perspiration. Even though I was so deeply traumatized by my crazy grandfather, and I've always thought that I needed to be invisible in order to survive, I now have all the resources I need to live a fulfilled life with art and social connections, and I can envision committing to doing everything I can to fulfill that dream, even though I still feel afraid at times. Finally, even though I learned at a young age to self-medicate by stuffing my face with food because I felt that I lived in a world where I was a square peg trying to fit into a round hole, I believe that I now have the resources within to allow my authentic self to lead me out of this addictive pattern by way of self-forgiveness and towards freedom from the cycle of feeding my addiction and then hating myself for having gotten caught up in it again. This one sentence alone won't do it, but it repeated frequently in conjunction with models 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to sort of share right away now. In my 5 models, I talk about going from defense, evolving from defense, and all of the defenses start with the letter R, to adaptations. And all of them start with the letter A. So I'll say this real quick, like model 1 from resistance. We know about that from classical psychoanalytic. That's an R word. That's a defense. 2, insight, but oops, insight doesn't start with the letter A. Awareness. Okay. So from resistance to awareness, that's model 1, from R to A. Model 2, from relentless hope, my concept of relentless hope. So relentless pursuit of the unattainable because of a refusal to confront and grieve the reality of the objects, limitations, separateness, and immutability, and thus the relentlessness of the pursuit and a refusal to get it. It's not going to happen. A refusal to grieve. Okay, model 2, from relentless hope to acceptance. There's your A word. There's the adaptation. Model 3, from compulsive and unwitting reenactment or repetition, but reenactment suggests more playing it out in the real world. Repetition could be more a little bit in the head. Model 1, a little more in the head, repetition, whatever. Reenactment, you're actually playing it out in the world. So compulsive and unwitting reenactment, there's your defense. 2, accountability. And in accountability is empowerment, where you take responsibility, hold yourself accountable for what you are compulsively and unwittingly reenacting of your unresolved, unmastered early on relational traumas that have been, that their dynamic having been introjected, pathogenic introjects, and the dynamic between them, the dysfunctional relational dynamic, and that then getting played out in your relationships and played out on the stage of the treatment, if all goes well, where there can at least now be a different outcome. So model 3 is from reenactment, there's your R word, to accountability. Whew, there's your A word. Now model 4, all right, from what is model 4? The defense. Retreat, relational absence. It's more schizoid, right? Retreat, relational absence. Remember, we want to facilitate surrender of the patient to analytic oneness. So there can be a new beginning, a starting over. And you want to help them overcome their dread of surrender to trusting someone, trusting you. All right. So from retreat or relational absence to accessibility, there's your A word, or availability, emotional availability, or authentic presence. So from relational absence R word, to authentic presence. There's your A word. And now, since I claim that Model 4 is an existential humanistic perspective, let's see if I can put my money where my mouth is here. It's also a story, when we're thinking more in terms of the existential piece, about evolving from nihilistic rejection, there's your R word, of existence, to existential acceptance, there's the A word, of its dualities, polarities, complementarities, complexities, uncertainties. So that's Model 4. It's a lot. Okay. And Model 5 is from refractory inertia. There's your R word. Or my dear sweet Gunnar said, why don't you just say rut? Forget that big word like photosynthesis. Just say rut. All righty. Then from rut, or rootedness to the spot, to action, actualizing action. There's the adaptation. All righty. I'm not sure why I got into that, but anyway, I did. So yeah, it's not just, you just say this sentence over and over again, but this in conjunction with acquiring awareness, acceptance, accountability, accessibility, and action, and going back and forth between and amongst them. There's not a pattern, not you do Model 2 first, then you do Model 1, then you do Model 3, then you do Model 4, and then 5. No. Over the course of a session, you're kind of back and forth based on whether or not in the moment the patient would seem to be being more resistant, Model 1, or a little more relentless in their pursuit of something that's not going to happen. Model 2, they need to grieve. Model 3, they're playing out something. They're reenacting an unresolved, unmastered relational drama in the treatment or in their life on the outside, in which case you focus in on a Model 3 projective identification and relational intervention, or Model 4, where they've retreated and you get it that you said or did something that in the moment was too painful for them to bear, so their defense was to retreat. And then in Model 5, where they're just entrenched and stuck, they can't get together their information for their taxes, they can't just pull together their CV, they just can't, and not, in which case sometimes because of some narratives, some old, bad, disempowering, distorted narratives, like they're no good and they'll never make it anyway. And Model 5 then, where we focus in on rescripting and updating the narratives that are getting in the way of the patient moving out of the conditioned reactivity that they are stuck in, that's conditioned. Okay. So over and over again, Model 5 here. I think this is Model 5. Yes, it is. In rapid fire succession and with ever more determined, embodied, and purposeful intent. I mean, when you're doing Model 5, it takes energy on your part, energy on the patient's part. And if they're not ready to do it, no problem. We have to go back to Models 1, 2, 3, 4. Some patients will say, I cannot envision doing anything differently from the way I do it now, or being anything different from the way I am now. And internally you think, oh boy, okay, we've got a long journey ahead. That's okay. We need to go back and do more work in Models 1, 2, 3, 4, because they're not yet ready to let go of. This is about quantum disentanglement from the old, bad, disempowering narratives and memories, the traumatic embodied memories, and envisioning something new, different, and compellingly better. No, they're not willing to go there. They don't want to. There's too much investment that they have in the old bad. So we need to go back and do some more work on the old bad, because they're not willing even to think about new good. Okay. So anyway, the patient repeats these co-constructed quantum disentanglement statements and variations thereof, alternately verbalizing first the mindfully retrieved old bad mindful awareness, body awareness, and then the intentionally envisioned new good. Throughout, the therapist encourages the patient to attend to the somatic elements, physical sensations, visceral reactivity, autonomic responses, muscular tension, rapid breathing, somatosensory perceptions that are being evoked within her as she begins to remember what her body has never forgotten. I mean, those of us who know and love Bessel van der Kolk, I mean, you can't do anything do any presentation unless you say that the body keeps the score. And that's true. In other words, simultaneously pay attention to old bad and set intention for new good. Therapeutic memory reconsolidation will then rescript and update old bad narratives with new good ones. But it is a process. Of course, I'm not saying just jump do it right now. Again, I'm a psychoanalyst, dyed in the wool psychoanalyst, but I've come to see the light over the course of the decades. And so I am that, but I'm other things too. Okay, model 5, admittedly, it was hard for me to find this in Unsplash, but here's a free photo. I got it. So model 5 is kind of like repeatedly asking of the patient that she rub her tummy and tap her head at the same time. Rub her tummy being accessing what's being held in her body, the old bad, and tapping her head being wanting to activate and introduce mindfully from the brain, from the head there, the analytic wisdom of from the head. So let's see what my next slide is. So model 5 is kind of like repeatedly asking of the patient that she rub her tummy and tap her head at the same time, which takes concentration and focus, or you'll kind of get it wrong. A new slide. The therapeutic goal, triumph of the envisioned and purposeful analytic wisdom in the brain, held in the brain, over the traumatic and entrenched emotional truth held in the body. Therapeutic memory reconsolidation. There, that's it. The therapeutic action on some level. You do it quick like, you do it over time. There's some more. You can perhaps read those on your own time. Here, Henry Ford. I love this image. Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's so true. That's so true. It's never too late to be what you might have been. George Eliot. Yogi Berra. When you come to a fork in the road, take it. Yes. All righty. Okay, so I'll say this real quick. My eyes on the time. Well, any questions so far? Let me just see any real quick questions, and maybe we'll just still keep the slides up, and somebody can then unmute themselves and ask a quick question that is related to what we've just said, please. And if not, I'm just going to continue. So, anybody want to speak or raise their hand? And if not, that's okay too. Let's see. I don't see any hands being raised, but I see some nice
There
people.
is a question, Martha. There is a question in the chat box.
Okay,
Manur,
thank
if
you.
you'd like to ask your question.
Okay, here, but why don't you just read it to us real quick, like, so we can get on here? Yeah.
Yeah. If memory is an illusion, then won't the whole of the psyche's
Yeah.
subjective perception also be an illusion?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
Some
yep,
of
yep, 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 yep. That's very good. That's a brilliant statement. Yes. It's all, quite frankly, we're all standing on shifting sands. And somebody somewhere said, no man ever crosses the same river twice because the river's different and so isn't he. Everything's ever busy in a state of constant flux. That's a brilliant question. And the answer is yes. Yes. Yes, there is no, and part of what in Model 4, remember I said, evolving from nihilistic rejection of existence to existential acceptance of its uncertainties and its polarities and its complementarities and its dualities. Nothing is for sure. Nothing is certain. Everything is continuously shifting. But by the same token, that means that we have some power. We're empowered and it's uplifting because we can then go some ways towards envisioning and recreating things in a good way. Now, our house in Clearwater Beach, we lost that. And there's a lot of stuff now in the, well, whatever you call it, the Gulf of Mexico or whatever we're going to call it. But so you just envision sort of like, well, it's all fixed. You have to work to get there, but we will get it there. We will get it there. So just envisioning it doesn't mean sort of like everything's all good again, but it's part of the process of getting evolving. So thank you for that brilliant question. I love that. All right, moving on. So the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy, a multifaceted approach to deep embodied healing. Okay, real quick, like now you know these: classical psychoanalytic, self-psychological, contemporary relational, existential humanistic, quantum neuroscientific. They're interactive and mutually enhancing. I'm going to go real quickly through these. I bought that from Shutterstock because it captures so beautifully. $35, synergy. Okay. People say, well, what's the diagnosis? I don't really do diagnosis per se, but finally, peer pressure was such. All righty. Model 1 would tend to be a little bit more focused on neurotic conflictedness, neurotic. Model 2 on narcissistic woundedness and narcissistic vulnerability. You're going to notice that all of these words start with the letter N. Model 3, more on noxious relatedness. These are the character disorders and the borderlines, or what we want to say is patients with character disorders and patients with borderline personality disorder, just as we say patients or people experiencing homelessness. So I want to be a little more respectful by saying that. Okay, model 4, well, the schizoid, patients with the schizoid, well, whatever. So anyway, model 4 is non-relatedness. Arne Modell talks about affective non-relatedness. So these are the N words, schizoid. And model 5, the inertia, neural entrenchment, and this is non-action. Individuals who are in a state in that moment of psychic paralysis, tethered to their traumatogenic past, haunted by their memories, trapped in conditioned and distorted narratives, and frozen in time. I already said this. So here, model 1, privileges thinking. Model 2, privileges feeling. Again, privileges. They all use all 5, but it privileges thinking. Cognitive. That's what psychoanalysis gets faulted for, actually. And then true blue psychoanalysts say, oh, no, we do more than that. Yes, you do more than just that, but you privilege awareness, thinking. Model 2, privileges feeling. Model 3, privileges enactments. Model 4, privileges the search for meaning. Model 5 privileges these traumatic embodied memories and deeply entrenched narratives. All right. If we had one word to describe the therapeutic action, here we go. Model 1, interpreting. Model 2, grieving. Model 3, negotiating. Model 4, surrendering. And model 5, disentangling, rescripting, and updating. Those are 3 words. But my claim is, and later you can think about challenging me, and I love challenges, anxiety-provoking challenges. And then I try to reconstitute at a more evolved level of understanding. So both for myself and then hopefully teaching it. Any situation like, well, what do you do if the patient is blah, 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 blah? And I'm going to say, what model in the moment I would find myself focusing in on, whether it's sort of interpreting, conflict statement, model 2, grieving, disillusionment statement, model 3, negotiating at Darlene Ehrenberg's intimate edge, model 4, surrendering to analytic oneness, oh, fresh shells, or model 5, dealing with the narratives, the outdated, disempowering, distorted narratives that are keeping the patient entrenched. Nah, I don't like that slide. Okay, so the Stark method, I've sort of said this. Yeah, I already said that. So neuroplasticity from a fixed mindset, we talk about that these days, mindset, to a growth mindset. From psychological, I'm lifting from ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, that fundamentally my Stark method is a story about advancing the patient from psychological rigidity to psychological resilience or flexibility, as the ACT folks say. And by the way, I do also lecture in the integrative medicine world, and there too, this concept is relevant and has been embraced by some of my colleagues in the integrative medicine world, from rigidity of the mind-body matrix, rigidity and obstructed flow, which creates disrupted ease of flow or diseases and disorderedness of the mind-body matrix, to ease of flow of information and energy throughout the entire extracellular matrix, and resilience, thereby resilience from rigidity to resilience. Okay. If you do not change direction, you may end up where you're heading. Lassie. Okay, here we go. Over the course of the past, my eyes on the time, 20 to 25 years, I, a dyed-in-the-wool psychoanalyst, have been committed to broadening my therapeutic horizons so that my Stark method can be more broadly encompassing. To that end, over the course of the last 3 decades, there you go, 20 to 25 years, I have immersed myself in the study of a variety of short-term intensive therapies. I did this when my psychoanalytic colleagues at the Boston Psychoanalytic, where I was teaching, and the Massachusetts Institute for Psychoanalysis, where I was teaching, I was doing this when they weren't looking. So I was immersing myself in the study of ACT, IFS, EMDR, ISTDP, AEDP, CBT, the 2 EFTs, emotional freedom techniques and emotionally focused therapy, although Sue Johnson said she wants it to be called emotional focused therapy, whatever. Somatic, Peter Levine, somatic experiencing, Pat Ogden, sensory motor psychotherapy, Al Pesso. In the 90s, Bessel van der Kolk, Pat Ogden, and I and others went up to Strolling Woods in New Hampshire and got a training with Al Peso on psychomotor psychotherapy, PBSP, and hypnotherapy, all of these. And more recently, I had the privilege and pleasure of immersing myself in Andy Hahn and Joan Beckett's brilliantly conceived The 1 Hour Miracle. It doesn't get done in just 1 hour, but it gets done more quick like. Again, not as broad-based or comprehensive as the models 1, 2, 3, 4 would be, but nonetheless, really effectively. All of these time-limited, laser-focused treatments have been able to demonstrate impressive and documented success with mobilizing to action. Model 5, right? Non-action, neural entrenchment, conditioned reactivity. With mobilizing to action, patients who are stuck in their lives and unable or unwilling to move forward. Bruce Ecker, Patricia Coughlin, David Feinstein. Nothing happens, said Albert Einstein, until something moves. Again, sort of like, duh. Plus, boy, that is profound, right? Nothing will happen until something moves. So from non-action to mobilization and movement and activation. At some point along, I don't want to read that. You know that. Okay. Well, you know that. I've already said that. And yeah, therapeutic memory reconsolidation, that brain-based concept, I'm going to say more about that in a second here, might well serve as the unifying conceptual framework for understanding the therapeutic action in all of these short-term intensive approaches to transformation and change. And I checked in with them, with Pat Ogden and Dick Schwartz and David Feinstein, to see if they thought, yeah, okay, therapeutic memory reconsolidation. They don't all use that word to describe it, but sort of like, well, okay, yeah, okay, old bad, new good, old bad, new good. Other stuff too, but yes, old bad, new good, old bad, new good. Okay. You're under no obligation, said Alan Watts, to be the same person you were 5 minutes ago. All right, you know that. We are the architects of our own destiny. Okay. Any questions here now? Please, maybe Hiba, read from the chat to me a question. Let's do it that way in the interest of time. If there are any questions, which there might not be, but if there are, so please remember to put your questions in.
Yes. There's one question right now which says, when you say patients who are unwilling, isn't willingness a prerequisite for impact?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So let me digress a little bit. And by the way, I say Uma's therapy from Cambridge. Well, hello. Okay, all righty. It's cold here. It's cold here. Better the last few days. All right, but anyway, so I'm going to talk about the title of my book, one of my books, Relentless Hope, the refusal to grieve, or the unwillingness to grieve. And some people will say, why don't you say the inability to grieve? And I, like maybe they just can't. And I personally believe that on some level, most people have the ability to do all sorts of things. I mean, if they don't have legs, obviously they're going to have trouble walking. So I don't want to be ridiculous about it. But people have the ability, but they're just really conflicted about exercising it. So, and so when patients say, I just can't cry, I will often reframe that as perhaps what they're saying is that in the moment, I like to put in the temporal element, that in the moment, they're sort of feeling that that's not a place they want to go to, that they're not feeling that that's something they're willing to do right now or wanting to do right now. So I tend to shift the can't and unable to that they really could if they were but willing. And if they're not willing, then we continue to do more work on that. So I kind of answered your question, I hope indirectly anyway. So Manur, please, yes, your question. Unmute yourself and ask. And maybe Hiba, you can help her unmute.
Yes, I've given her permission to unmute.
Yes.
Good, there you are. We can hear you.
So I can ask a question at the end as well, if
Okay.
you're a bit short on time.
But
I
if
can
it's a
ask
quick,
it now.
easy question now, I will either answer it now or answer it at the end.
It's not a quick, easy one.
Okay,
It's
so
a
at
big
the
one.
end, please, would be good.
Yeah.
Thank you. But remember it. Okay, so I want to highlight real quick, like the distinction between models 1 to 4 and model 5, just to be highlighting the difference here. Okay, so models 1 to 4, long-term, in-depth, psychoanalytically informed approaches versus model 5, directive, targeted, intensive, constructivist, brain-based approach. Okay, so Soren Kierkegaard, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. And models 1 to 4 are about understanding life backwards. Model 5 is about living life forward. And my most recent book was indeed entitled, Life Can Only Be Understood Backwards, but it Must Be Lived Forwards, analyzing to understand, but envisioning possibilities to incentivize action. Kind of not terribly memorable title, but anyway, in analyzing to understand, but envisioning possibilities to incentivize action. Okay. Whereas the long-term, in-depth models 1 to 4 focus on the relationship between the past and the present. The directive intensive model 5 focuses on the relationship between the present and the future. It's about leaning into the edge between the present and the future. Whereas models 1 to 4 require that the patient take ownership of her past, so she won't repeat it in the present. Model 5 requires that she take ownership of her future. Now, again, these are just privileges. Obviously, everybody knows there's a past, present, and future. So it's nothing is exclusive. It's all about mutually enhancing. I'm just talking about what the focus tends to be. Even just yesterday, I said to somebody, psychoanalyst, privileges the cognitive, and this dyed-in-the-wool psychoanalyst, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there. No, it's also about affective. Yeah. It is also about affective. It's also about embodied. It's also about the relationship. But yes, it privileges the cognitive. All right. When you're always looking back, you can't see what's coming. And that's from a 2020 Kia SUV ad on television. Okay. Whereas models 1 to 4 are in the tradition of understanding our history as our destiny, which we are condemned to repeat unless we can remember it and work it through. Model 5 focuses on our destiny as our choice, which is ours to create if, against the backdrop of retrieving and reliving a targeted trauma and the disempowering, distorted narratives that had been constructed as a result, we can but these 3 concepts, really important because they go in the second part of a quantum disentanglement statement. Envision a better future for ourselves. That's envision. Own our need, therefore, to change, to reposition ourselves with respect to our past, with respect to our present, with respect to our future. Reposition ourselves, that we need to take ownership of our need to change. A lot of our patients, a lot of our psychoanalytic patients, it never occurred to them. They think that people around them need to change. It never occurred to them that maybe they themselves need to change. And again, we don't necessarily right away say, well, you're going to need to change if you're going to be, if the world's going to become a different place for you. But ultimately in model 5, when you get there, they need to take ownership of their need to change. And then model 4, the third one is, and commit to actualizing that vision. So envision, own, commit. So EOC, envision, own, and commit. There you go. Envision, own, commit. And I love that slide. And I want that to be sort of memorable. Envision, own, commit. That goes into the right side of, well, I appreciate there that manures, smile. Okay, that goes into the right side of these quantum disentanglement statements. Envision, own, commit. Our history, models 1 to 4, as our destiny. Model 5, our destiny as our choice. Ask yourself what is really important, and then have the wisdom and courage to build your life around your answer. Courage is something that just does not get emphasized. That and generosity. They're 2 words that I just don't get used enough, and I think should be. One is courage on the part of the therapist as well as the patient. And the other is generosity. We talk about being empathic and understanding as a therapist. But what about being generous? Being generous, for heaven's sakes. Okay. So models 1 to 4 emphasize insight into the early on relational traumas and emotional injuries that have shaped the patient's misperceptions of self, others, and the world as part of the working through process, reminiscent of Freud's remembering, repeating, and working through. These defenses, still models 1 to 4, misconstruals of reality are then gradually tamed, modified, and integrated as they slowly evolve through iterative healing cycles of disruption in reaction to anxiety-provoking challenge, and then repair or recovery in response to anxiety assuaging support. So from defensive rigidity to adaptive resilience. And I don't think in terms of the more traditional defenses as being intellectualization, compartmentalization, repression, suppression, but rather when something is just too much, too stressful, too much anxiety to be processed, integrated, and adapted to. And instead, the patient mobilizes some kind of defensive reaction, like retreat, or they somatize, or they shut down, or they get angry, some kind of defensive reaction. We want to evolve them through these cycles to an adaptation, adaptive resilience. And adaptation meaning, in my mind, the capacity to process and integrate the impact of whatever it is that's coming your way. We are being continuously bombarded, both in our minds and our bodies, by all sorts of environmental stimuli all the time. And it's our capacity to take them in our stride, that we're resilient, that we can handle it. That is, from my point of view, mental health. So it's not like somebody goes from being ill to being all better, but it's a continuum, and they are advancing, hopefully, from being rather rigid to being somewhat less rigid, and advancing to more resilience, which is what ultimately we really want people to have, resilience, so that when these blows come our way over the course of a day, I had like 5 yesterday. I had 5 sort of things that sort of, oh my God, threw me off, including I was supposed to be connecting with somebody on Zoom and my computer broke down. Stressful. And either you can get defensive and your whole body tightens and you get a headache, or you can sort of probably do your deep breathing 4-7-8 and sort of take it in your stride and then figure out, well, I'll use the other computer then. It was stressful though. All right, but anyway, so from defensive rigidity to adaptive resilience. But model 5 now, that was model 4, conceives of the narratives. Now we talk a little bit more about narratives, constructing of narratives. Again, it's the same patient, it's just they have slightly different lexicons. Model 4, we talk about the ego and ego strength. That was model 1. Model 1 about the ego. Model 2 about the self, a cohesive or coherent self with deficits or not. Model 3 about the relational self, the relational self. Or the self in relation. Model 4 about the private self or the impenetrable self or the true self, Winnicott. And model 5, the entrenched self and or the future self. All right, so different different lexicon for them. Anyway, model 5 conceives of the narratives that the patient had constructed in order to make meaning, in an effort to make meaning, as a young child in a desperate attempt to make sense of her world, as potentially able to be, yes, this harkens back to what we were saying at the beginning, re-scripted, recontextualized, and updated, even as in response to that earlier question, excellent, brilliant question, that even the updating, even that's in a state of constant flux, uncertainty, constant, continuous flux. With nothing, no man steps into the same river twice in the same way, however that goes. The river's not the same, they're not the same. No moment in time is the same as the previous moment or the next moment, and quite frankly, all the moments are quantumly entangled and timeless and as one anyway. That starts to verge off into what I don't understand about quantum theory. Anyway, these narratives, which underlie the patient's psychic inertia and thwarted potential, are thought not to seal her fate. These disempowering, distorted, outdated narratives that worked at the time. They were defensive and they were helpful at the time. These now no longer relevant, these distorted, no longer reality-based narratives are thought not to seal her fate, but if rewritten, re-scripted, updated, to hold the potential for reconfiguring her future and advancing her from inaction and stagnation to action and the freedom to actualize her dreams. Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. Whereas models 1 to 4 about looking back and remembering so that old bad will not be recreated in the present. So you don't want something bad to happen in the present. It's more about pathology. Or so it's said sometimes, and I'm sort of saying it too. Model 5 is about looking ahead and envisioning so that new good can be created for the future. Oh, here, yeah. Only take responsibility for your destiny if you want to get somewhere in your life. If you don't, it's like getting into your car and just driving with no particular destination in mind. And sometimes psychoanalytic work is like that. I've discussed cases that were 30 years, and the patient is doing less well now than she had at the beginning. Part of what got me going about Model 5 was I was a discussant at a conference in Boston at the Fairmont Copley Plaza. And the patient had been in treatment for 30 years with a wonderful therapist, psychoanalytic, self-psychologically oriented psychoanalytic therapist. And the patient, once an MD practicing, at the end of the 30 years was on disability and no longer practicing. But they were working on insight and talking about her parents and their bad parents, et cetera, et cetera. 30 years later. So like, that's probably not quite right. All right. Where am I going here? So long-term in-depth treatments. Here, models 1 to 4, might well advance the patient along the continuum toward greater awareness, acceptance, accountability, and accessibility, right? Those are the adaptations, but not specifically action and actualization. That's where Model 5 comes in. Model 5 then privileges envisioning possibilities, taking ownership of the need to change, setting coherent, purposeful, and embodied intention, committing to action, self-empowerment, personal agency, freedom, choice, creating one's destiny, realizing one's dreams, actualizing one's potential. In other words, Model 5 is not deterministic. It is a constructivist model, empowering and inspiring of hope. And you should hear Bruce Lipton talking about this kind of concept. And it's just uplifting and sort of amazing. In conjunction with models 1 to 4, not everybody can or is or willing or wants to go. They're unwilling. That now is not the time for them to go to envisioning something new, different, and compellingly better. Here in Model 5, the therapist leads, more directive, and the patient follows. Unlike models 1 to 4, where it's more the patient leads the way, they associate, and the therapist follows, micro-tracks and follows. Together in Model 5, they co-construct the patient's future, and it takes a lot of concentrated effort and hard work. Okay, well, I want to give you this quote here from Carol Kaufman, who's a psychologist and a coach. She said, her words, as a therapist, in red are her words, the black is my words. As a therapist, I follow the trail of tears to healing. And that's, from my point of view, it corresponds to my models 1 to 4, roughly. As a coach, says Carol Kaufman, both psychologist and coach, I follow the trail of dreams to actualization. That would be my model 5. My approach truly is intended to be not only a synergy, not only integrative, but holistically connected, if I could be so bold. Okay. The best way to predict your future is to create it, said Abraham Lincoln. The only person you're destined to become is the person you decide to be, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Now, you might ask, do I believe this? Yes, I do. And let me say, so I worked for a number of years with a patient who'd been in previous multiple failed therapies. She came to me as just a hardcore borderline or a patient with borderline personality disorder. And one of my specialties was I was sort of known for working with such patients, which is, not a reputation you necessarily want to have. So everybody sends you all their hard cases that haven't really, they haven't had success with. Although in a way, I love this Janis Joplin quote, freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose. So if I know that they've already failed many times over, the bar isn't set as high. So, I failed too, like whatever. But anyway, so this patient at the end of our 8 years together, working really hard, it was 8 years, admittedly, she was no longer a patient with borderline. And at the end, she said the following. Now, listen, please, I'll tell you the first part and you'll gasp. And then you want to have to listen, please, to the second part. She said, my God, Dr. Stark, back then, more people called me Dr. Stark. Now they just say either, hey, you or Martha. Anyway, Dr. Stark, you're the kind of person who would kick the crutches out from underneath a cripple. And then she said, thank you. Isn't that interesting? So yeah, you get to challenge. You know, you're getting paid. You're doing this. It's not just, I mean, I knew how at the age of 7, you know, I mean, I knew how to be sort of warm and supportive and fuzzy and oh my God, and empathic and teasing out and micro-tracking what they were feeling. I knew how to do that. It's been all the years of training that I've done in my own intensive therapy. I was in 3 times a week intensive psychoanalytic psychotherapy with a social worker who was very, very, very dear to me. And, you know, periodically I hated her guts. And the story I tell is, and then I did have a training analysis with an MD, psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, and that was fairly brief, but I needed to do that to be able to be certified as a psychoanalyst. But my real work sort of got done with my clinical social worker, psychoanalytically oriented clinical social worker. But I would get periodically really angry at her. So I was seeing her in an outpatient setting at the hospital there, the Beth Israel Hospital up in Boston here. And every time I got angry at her, which quite frankly, in the transference, but whatever, got angry with her, I would actually, when I left the session, I would go to the library. I was a medical student back then at the Harvard and at the BI. I'd go to the library and I'd steal On Working with the Patient by Patrick Casement. Now, I was allowed to check it out because I was allowed to. I was, you know, medical student there. But I wouldn't check it out. I'd steal it. And then when I wasn't angry at her anymore, I'd return it. Anyway, and I did this off and on over the course of the years. Eventually, I was telling her that, well, I'm mad now, and I'd steal the book. And then I'd say, well, I've returned it. Anyway, after a while, I probably wasn't nearly as mad at her anymore. But at the very end, she gave me a gift. And the gift was the book, Patrick Casement's On Learning from the Patient, which was very, very sweet. Anyway, so a very special memory for me. I am not what happened to me. I'm what I choose to become, Carl Jung. Whatever the mind of man can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Similar to the other things that have been the Henry Ford statement. This is Napoleon Hill, one of the most read books anywhere. Okay, here's a real brief little something. So consider the case of a patient who resists venturing into new social situations for fear of being shamed. So this is two pages here, little clinical vignette. Resists venturing into new social situations for fear of being shamed. The psychoanalytically informed approaches, models 1 to 4, would focus first on exploring the historical roots of the patient's recurring irrational fear, and then on gradually working through, quite possibly within the context of the transference, the parental errors of omission in the form of deprivation and neglect. I call that absence of good, and the parental or the caregiving, whatever, errors of commission in the form of trauma and abuse. I call that presence of bad. So the stressors are both absence of good and presence of bad. Not enough good and too much bad. Slightly different concepts, but they both exist often, usually hand in hand. All right, so working through the parental errors of omission and the parental errors of commission that might have given rise to this fear of being shamed. This is psychoanalytically oriented, models 1 to 4. Grieving, model 2, would inevitably play a pivotal role in liberating the patient from her irrational fear, her infantile attachments, and her compulsive repetitions or reenactments. And the grieving would be accompanied by, these are some big words here, think photosynthesis, but accompanied by adaptive, not defensive. We defensively interject bad. Think pathogenic interject. We defensively interject bad. We adaptively internalize good. Okay, the grieving would be accompanied by adaptive, this is a good thing, transmuting, but anyway, otherwise known as structure building. Internalization is the way it's written in the literature, of whatever good there is in the relationship, apart from the bad, the failure, the disappointment, the loss. So transmuting adaptive internalizations of the good that had been there. Okay, that's the way models 1, 2, 3, 4 would work with this patient who fears venturing into new social situations for fear of being shamed. Okay, let's do the next slide. The constructivist, brain-based model 5, however, would highlight the patient's fear of being shamed as deriving from an outdated and maladaptive narrative, and would then repeatedly and decisively challenge this procedurally organized, implicitly held, and conditioned relational expectation of being shamed by encouraging the patient to envision the possibility of something new, different, and compellingly better for her future. The jolting, as they often get called, mismatch experiences, but also violations of expectation or prediction errors. But anyway, the jolting violations of expectation resulting from this repeated, startling, and decisive juxtaposition of conditioned old bad with envisioned new good would ultimately generate enough dissonance, cognitive, experiential, somatic dissonance, that a new, more reality-based narrative, fueled by the wisdom of the body and its intrinsic need to restore homeostatic balance, could then be locked in or reconsolidated in place of the old, now disconfirmed narrative, such that going forward, the expectation would be not of being shamed, but of being, say, accepted. All right, now let me say, because I'm going to do this one real quick, then tell you a little bit more about therapeutic memory reconsolidation and wrap up. So be thinking of your questions, please. Put them kind of concisely, like, please, in the chat box so that we can read them quickly and I can do my best to answer. So from trauma victim to trauma survivor. When Maria was a young girl, she had experienced frequent emotional abuse at the hands of her rageful alcoholic father. And in a desperate attempt to make sense of that abuse, she had decided, she constructed this narrative, that it must have been she who was the bad one, she who was at fault. But Maria was fortunate enough to work with a therapist who understood the transformational power of therapeutic memory reconsolidation, and who therefore offered Maria a rapid-fire series of empowering and disconfirmatory, is the word often used, experiences, albeit imaginary, that repeatedly and forcibly challenged Maria's procedurally organized, embodied, conditioned expectation of being always a victim. These juxtaposition experiences, these optimally stressful, growth incentivizing mismatch experiences, took place in conjunction with reactivated embodied memories of her father's abuse, such that Maria was eventually able to update her self-negating narrative. Yes, and her other, I need to revise that a little bit. To update her self-negating narrative, she no longer perceived herself as constantly at risk of being abused. Instead, Maria came in a more reality-based way to realize that it was her alcoholic father who had been the victimizer and she who was innocent. Importantly, despite now having an updated narrative that offered a fresh, more reality-based perspective, Maria still remembered the fact of her father's abusive rages, but she was no longer convinced that she had deserved the abuse and that the world was a dangerous, unsafe place. In essence, she was able to reinterpret the entire scenario, reconstruct as a story not about herself as ever vulnerable to being abused by outside malevolent forces, but sorry, wait a minute. Sorry, I know people wonder what I'm doing when I do that. You might think that there's a cat under there. There isn't. There's a radiant heater and a radiant heat, and I don't want to sort of burn my foot. Anyway, be that as it may. In essence, she was able to reinterpret the entire scenario as a story not about herself as ever vulnerable to being abused by outside malevolent forces, but about her father as an often out of control alcoholic who would periodically fly into irrational and unjustified rages. All right. Oh, yeah. So here are the Beatles. Take a sad song and make it better. Yeah, okay, Model 5. Take a sad song and make it better. Healing does not mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls our lives. Okay, here we go. So here, I'm going to go through these. This is more the neuroscientific piece here. So Okay, neuroscientists had long believed that once a new experience, especially a traumatic one, had been stored in long-term memory, it would be permanently installed. Perhaps it could then be modified by subsequent experiences, but its essence would nonetheless remain intact, lurking just beneath the surface as a somatic memory, ever vulnerable to being reactivated and re-experienced, thereby reinforcing its intensity, what I was saying earlier, before once again returning to body consciousness. This was very much in keeping with Hebb's postulate, advanced in 1949 by the neuropsychologist Donald Hebb: neurons that fire together wire together, meaning that reactivated and re-experienced memories are simply reinforced through repetition and never resolved. If we are therefore ever busy inviting our patients to remember, to relive, and to retell their early on traumas, as we simply bear witness and resonate empathically with their lived experience of intense fear, terror, helplessness, and hopelessness, without offering them as an alternative something new, different, and compellingly better, a new narrative, then are we not possibly doing them a grave disservice? Think 30 years into psychoanalytic treatment. Won't we be potentially running the risk of inadvertently reinforcing those traumatic memories of abuse? Possibly, just to think about that, without actually resolving them. In other words, if all we do is to support the patient as she remembers, relives, and gives voice to her lived experience, without at the same time challenging the old bad narratives by encouraging her, by encouraging her to envision new good antidotes as possible alternatives, then are we not potentially creating an untenable situation over the long term of analysis paralysis, 30 years, and neural entrenchment through our unintended reinforcement of old bad? Potentially. Admittedly, the patient might well feel wonderfully validated, but won't she potentially become ever more entrenched in those developmental relational traumas and the maladaptive, disempowering narratives to which those traumas had given rise? Fortunately, over the course of the past several decades, a dedicated group of trailblazing cognitive neuroscientists, dissatisfied with the deterministic idea that memories, like diamonds, are forever, have been using advanced neuroimaging techniques, including functional MRIs, scanning microscopy, and optogenetics, to map out what happens in the brain when a thought is being thought, a feeling felt, and a memory remembered in an embodied, lived fashion. Their focus has been on how old memories, especially implicitly held traumatic memories, consolidated in long-term memory and distributed in networks throughout the corticolimbic system, implicit relational knowing, Carla Neinsruth and others, can be subsequently updated and reconsolidated. Indeed, cognitive researchers are discovering that the brain, in response to ongoing new experience and information, is continuously adapting by modifying itself at the level of the neural synapse in order to stay current and relevant. This learning process, which involves, this is what the cognitive researchers have discovered through their different neuroimaging techniques, which involves both the destruction of old neural networks and the construction of new ones, speaks to the adaptive capacity of the brain and the dynamic nature of memory. In essence, the brain's remarkable neuroplasticity. Again, I'd reference Norman Dodge's The Brain That Changes Itself, both structurally at the level of the synapse and functionally at the level of the memory. More specifically, neuroscientists have recently made, and this is just in the last 10, 20 years, the groundbreaking discovery that when implicitly held memories are reactivated and re-experienced in an embodied, lived fashion, the network of synapses encoding those memories will become potentially unlocked for a time-limited period. This unlocking or deconsolidation, destabilization, signals the opening up of a reconsolidation window, a brief window of opportunity when memories become transiently fragile and sensitive to modification by environmental input. Both this dedicated group of cognitive neuroscientists who study memory reconsolidation in their laboratories and the similarly impassioned group spearheaded by Bruce Ecker and David Feinstein of neuroscientifically inclined clinicians who study it in their offices agree that 4 to 6 hours is the critical time frame. So we might want to think about doing therapy sessions that last 4 to 6 hours after getting them into a yin healing state first and getting a parasympathetic nervous system activated. Anyway, but I'm not teaching about that in the moment. But anyway, agree that this reconsolidation window, that 4 to 6 hours is the critical time frame for the destabilized synapses encoding the traumatic memories to remain malleable and therefore vulnerable to updating with new experience and information, such that these synapses can be rewired under the right circumstances and the traumatic memories they encode reprogrammed. For this locking in or reconsolidation to occur, there must be repeated and dramatic juxtaposition of old bad learned expectations with new good envisioned possibilities, such that there will be jolting and transformational mismatch experiences. In the neuroscientific literature referred to as violations of expectation, novelty detection, in the clinical literature as juxtaposition experiences or disconfirmatory mismatches. The idea that abruptly, rapidly, unexpectedly, and decisively introducing an element of surprise in order to provoke, not promote, but provoke change certainly makes intuitive sense, yes? As does the idea that when new information directly contradicting a previous emotional learning or intellectual learning is repeatedly juxtaposed with what had come to be expected, the old memory will eventually be forced adaptively to update itself, to become more relevant. As it happens, okay, here we go. Somewhat surprisingly and counterintuitively, the brain can change itself, they have discovered, in response not only, I said this earlier, I hinted at it, to experiencing something new, but also to imagining something new. In that statement is the power of intentionality. If you think you're going to win, you will. If you think you're going to fail, you will. Whatever you believe you can or can't do, you're right. All right. So the brain can change itself in response not only to experiencing something new, but also to imagining something new, envisioning it. In fact, a growing body of evidence supports the finding that simply visualizing or envisioning something, even though it occurs entirely in the mind and in the body too, is sometimes almost as effective as actually doing it. Yeah, I should say, and in the body too, because you want it in the body too. According to research being done at the Cleveland Clinic, participants, this is cool, were able to strengthen muscles just by visualizing physical movement. That's cool. This impact simply required concentrated mental practice, the cognitive rehearsal of a physical activity without actual movement. In fact, one study demonstrated that if subjects wanting to master a particular skill were simply to visualize mastery of it, then they would be able to decrease by 50% the number of actual practice hours required. Whew. Just observe Olympians doing their visualization exercises with their eyes closed as they prepare to compete in such sports as figure skating, swimming, diving, dressage, gymnastics, skateboarding, to name a few. Clearly top-ranked athletes figured out long ago that forced mental practice can definitely improve performance. There's a fancy slide for another time. Now, when therapeutic, this is an important slide. When I'm my eyes on the time and we're good. I hope there are comments and questions in the chat. Brief, quick one so that I can really focus. When therapeutic memory reconsolidation updates a traumatic memory, what is it that changes? And what is it that remains the same? Now, importantly, the fact of the event underlying the traumatic memory will not change. If you were raped, you still remember you were raped. So the episodic memory itself will remain intact. What will change, however, will be the body's memory of the trauma, its emotional charge, its valence, and the narratives to which the trauma had given rise. In other words, how the patient positions herself in relation to the traumatic experience, how she contextualizes it will change. All right, now, importantly, neuroscientists have discovered that the consolidation, that's the first time, and reconsolidation, after it's been deconsolidated and now we reconsolidated in a slightly newer, better, more evolved way. Anyway, neuroscientists have discovered that the consolidation and reconsolidation of memories requires the synthesis of new proteins in the cortical limbic system. And that inhibiting protein synthesis will interfere with long-term potentiation. That is, with the transfer of traumatic memories from short-term storage in the hippocampus to long-term storage in distributed networks throughout the neocortex. So some promising research is now being conducted with the synthetic drug propranolol, a beta blocker that, as many will know, dampens the stress response peripherally. Some of my colleagues take it before they give a talk. I didn't take it, but I did do my breathing exercises before I came on this morning. I don't do propranolol. Anyway, a beta blocker that dampens the stress response peripherally and inhibits protein synthesis centrally because this propranolol disrupts memory consolidation / reconsolidation. Propranolol is a promising novel treatment for patients suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Although propranolol does not erase the traumatic memory itself, it can modify the negative emotional valence associated with the trauma. Okay, wrapping up, getting near the end here. I'm going to go through, there's a trained method, the Tomatis method, that helps sharp jolting musical contrasts to fine-tune the brain. Apparently is a fabulous way to get the brain sort of functioning better. Okay, and EMDR, we had referenced that also captures the essence of this. Okay, so yeah, whether juxtaposing old bad with new good, past with present and future, outdated and disempowering with updated and empowering, defensive rigidity with adaptive resilience, I'm almost done, traumatic memories with healing potential, emotional truth, knowledge with analytic wisdom, so right brain versus left brain, embodied or body versus brain, embodied somatic awareness with cognitive mental awareness, body consciousness with brain consciousness, innate wisdom of the body with acquired wisdom of the body. They work together, they work in concert. But ultimately, by juxtaposing them dramatically, generation of growth incentivizing mismatch experiences will result, the working through of which will provide impetus and opportunity for evolving the patient from a dysregulated trauma response to a regulated state of safety, stabilization, and integration. Body consciousness, I love this slide. I created it, works in concert with brain consciousness. And by the way, parenthetically, cross-lateral movements that involve crossing the midline of the body with an arm and or a leg help to balance the body, thereby strengthening collaboration between both sides of the brain, kind of strengthens the corpus callosum, that band of fibers that connects the two sides of the brain. And it strengthens collaboration between both sides of the brain, or as sometimes we write it instead, left, right, left, right, left, right, the brain, body, brain, body, brain, body, depending upon sort of what your focus is. And juggling. I'd read that juggling helps to improve the brain. So I've been trying to juggle, but I throw the balls. I practically broke my TV throwing the balls around because they're a little hard. I'm not very good at it. Okay, here we go. Yeah, those are some more quantum disentanglement statements. Okay, in conclusion, I hope you have your comments. In conclusion, both simple and profound is the compelling idea that therapeutic modalities that have deep and enduring psychodynamic change as their ultimate goal have the power to reconfigure the past and thereby to transform the future. As outdated and conditioned reaction evolves into updated and corrected response, and rigidity advances to resilience. In essence, the working through process is a story about reshaping the past to make new futures possible. In the strange and counterintuitive world of quantum physics, this riveting idea, namely that the present has the power to rewrite the past and thereby to change the future, is referred to as retrocausation. Who knew that that's what we do in our work? Nobody gets to live life backward. Look ahead. That is where your future lies. That's from Ann Landers, the gossip columnist. Anyway, Ann Landers. She had that right. And let me see. Thank you. And let me just say, please, I want to say, so I do offer, please, that some of you might know about, but anyway, I offer an entirely free 90-minute weekly spot supervision Zoom session. It's both live and recorded for later viewing on my private YouTube channel. And it's Thursdays, so it's going to be in an hour and a half, Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern time until 1:30 Eastern time. But it's both live and recorded for later viewing. And it's entirely free, and you can listen to any or all or do whatever you want. It's just, for me, an opportunity to demonstrate how the Stark method of psychodynamic synergy can be translated into real-world clinical practice. I would love to have you join if you're interested. If so, you would want to please email me at Martha Stark MD, no space, but I just did that, at Synergy Med. Remember that $35 Shutterstock slide, Synergy Med.Solutions. That's the extension. And I believe, yes, some references, and I'm going to stop screen sharing. Okay, now, oh, good, I get to see you guys. Oh, here you are. Oh, good, oh, good, oh, good. All right, so questions. I will, if I can do this, if you're okay with this, I want to take a look. Can I see this? I'll do this. Manure has a long one. I'm going to come back to that in a second because I see it's a long one. Umer's therapy from Cambridge. When you say patients who are, yes, yeah, unwilling isn't willingness. Yeah, you did that. A pre-request for impact. Yes, well put. Thank you. I think you were satisfied with my answer. Oh, I can't unmute. Okay, right. Umer, sincerest apology. I need to shoot off for a session with the patient. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, good. In Model 5, doesn't the need to self-actualize ignore the limitations of the social world, constant negatives like discrimination, active abuse, etc.? Absolutely. So either we can just give up and say, listen, the world out there is so bad, forget it. There's probably nothing we can do. But I believe that at least, no matter how difficult it might be, if you lose your house to a hurricane or to a fire, or if you don't have your legs anymore, if you have a terrible ongoing situation, we do the best we can to advance from rigidity to more resilience, from a rigid defensive reaction, which impedes growth, to a more flexible, more adaptive response, more resilience, more flexibility that at least enables us to go a little bit more with the flow. So again, this is not about you go from you're not healthy to you are. No. Some of us are like older than we used to be. Some of us don't have our houses anymore. Some of us were raped. Some of us don't have legs. Some of us are living in an ongoing situation with an alcoholic somebody or with a drug addictive or raped or this or that. And like we all have problematic things either that happened in the past or that might be happening, or we're all in the middle of a lawsuit. There are all of these things going on, but it's how we position ourselves. It's about, I mean, as Act said, it's about going from defensive rigidity, oh no, and retreating, and or getting sick all the time, or getting the headache, or retreating, or being depressed, or being anxious, all of which are kind of, when it's just too much to process, integrate, and adapt to a more empowered and, God damn it, I'm going to do what I can do then, and perhaps build it back even better than it had been before. Our house in Clearwater Beach, it's going to be more hurricane resistant this time, and we're going to put in stuff that we didn't have the first time. We're going to make it even better than before, stronger at the broken places. So no, please understand, this is not about sort of like, it's all good, but get rid of all bad. No, 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 no. It's how we position ourselves in relation to it. We hope with more resilience and capacity to adapt than need to defend and rigidity. I hope that sort of, Urfa, answers that a little bit. I hope so. I wonder if I'll get a nod from Urfa. I just see the image there. All right, now, Zizia, how do you challenge the patient and encourage change without making them feel inadequate if they are unable to overcome the inertia? Yeah, you're going to be challenging at the point where they are pretty stuck, to not make the patient feel they are failing themselves as well as the therapist under pressure to transform. So these are patients who say, listen, I know that I'm failing myself. I hate myself for what I do. I feel ashamed of my eating cycle and so on. And we together in Model 5, together, we talk about what they and I together, co-created together. What are we thinking? Because models 1, 2, 3, 4 haven't quite done it. So what are we thinking actually is where we want to go at this point. They say, I've got to be able to get a handle on my eating disorder. Or I know I was sexually abused early on, and I still, that impacts all of my relationship in the here and now. I've got to be able to figure out. If they're not saying that, then we're not going to do model 5. We're still working on helping them to understand and to become more aware, to become a little more accepting after doing grieving, to become a little more accountable for what they're playing out on the stage of their lives that's getting them in trouble, to become more accessible and more available, so that we can access them and we can work with them, so they're not just disembodied and dissociated. So yeah, I mean, we've got our hands full. I work with patients who have been in previous multiple failed therapies. Believe me, there are all sorts of things that they do not want to be doing. They're not able to do. They're not this or that. We work with what we've got, and we see if we can budge the needle a little bit. And as my patient had said, you're the kind of person who would kick the crutches out from underneath the cripple. Thank you. And again, what I want to say, I love Sania. And again, I know sometimes we think like, oh my God. I mean, with some of my patients who know me well, and I have a really solid therapeutic alliance, narcissistic alliance, as it's sometimes called, I will say to them, my God, I'm trying to shame you. And they say, yeah, I know, but I'm still so invested in this that I'm doing. And I'll be in their face. Or one patient will say, I want you to get in my face about this, because we've worked together, and they're frustrated, like, God damn it. They still can't get their tax stuff in, or they still are so obsessed with that thing that happened 30 years ago, and they just can't let it go. And they say, my God, I got to let it go. So Model 5 is co-created. We work together. When they just say, enough already, I can't stand this, I've got to get a handle on it. Please help me. And then we envision, own, commit. Envision, own, commit. And if it gets too much, then we go back, models 1, 2, 3, 4. Good. We're getting a nod there. Yes, from Fisa. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, good. We got a like from Meryl. Okay, and Fisa. By simply repeating the exercise, just repetition. Yes. The back, just as EMDR, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, and REM sleep. And I often, what I'll do sometimes is, before I go to bed at night, and I like to watch TV a little bit, especially now that my dear sweet Gunner is down in Clearwater Beach, and I watch TV a little bit just to kind of comfort myself. And but I will think about some thorny theoretical issue that I'm struggling with. I'm trying to figure it out, and then I go to sleep, and I have my little, I don't have it on now, but my Oura ring, and it tells me how much REM sleep and how much deep sleep I'm getting, and I am busy then coming up with the answer as I sleep. And sometimes in the morning, upon awakening, I pop out of bed. It's like, oh my God, I think I have an answer. So I've evolved from stuck, I can't, no, to somehow back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I now have a little more clarity, a little more resilience, so I can do a little more thinking about it. So there you go. Repetition, yes. Repetition of the old, bad, new, good, old, bad, creating of the disconfirmatory mismatch experiences that are optimally stressful, where I define optimal stress as being just the right balance between old, bad, and new, good, old, bad, new, good. It's really fun to do. And after a while, patients do it. Now, I'm going to tell you one of my Model 1 conflict statements. My Model 1 conflict statement would go, they start with because it's a little more cognitive, it privileges cognitive. That you could ask your parents for the money to support your ongoing psychotherapy. Now, do they know that? Yeah. And the parent has told them that many times. And I know because they went and told me. But no, I need to stop treatment, because, I don't have the money. All right. So I say, that you could, of course, choose to take your parents up on their generous offer to finance your treatment, but so that's their adaptive capacity. It's a little anxiety provoking. That's okay. Anxiety provoking challenge. There you have it. You know that you could, and you name something that the healthier part of them does know, but now I'm going to resonate empathically because I know them so well. I've come to know them because I listen well with their defensive need to protest no. But you find yourself thinking, no, I don't want to go there. If they were to lend it to me or give it to me, too many ties, too many strings. They never just give something unconditionally. There would be some kind of string attached, and there are already too many of those, and I'm trying to disentangle myself from them. So you have named both their adaptive capacity to know a more healthy something, which is they really do need to be staying in treatment, and the parent really would pay for it, and we can work on whatever the strings might be. But we're coupling that with the old bad in this case. So that was new good, and the old bad defensive need to protest. Oh no, but I can't because there are too many strings already, and I don't want to have to go there. So no. So all of my interventions, you don't know it yet, but all of my interventions in models 1 to 5 are repetitively back and forth, defensive need or adaptive capacity. It doesn't matter which one comes first. Defensive need, adaptive capacity, old bad, new good, disempowered, more empowering, in order to evolve the patient from outdated to a little more updated. So they may still be living in the circumstances that are just heinous, and they may still be struggling in all sorts of ways. They're in the middle of a lawsuit. Their house hasn't been rebuilt. They're in a bad relationship with somebody. The kids are drug addicts. The parents are drug addicts, whatever. But how we handle the myriad stressors to which we're being continuously exposed day in and day out, that's what this year's theory is theoretically supposed to be all about. Now I'm going to go back to, let's see, Miral. Wait, I have that in Ufra. It did. Thank you. All right, Miral. And then I'm going to go back to that first one at the beginning from Manur, which I think is a longer one. Okay, Miral, can you please say more? Oh, yes, thank you. About the idea that the therapist leads and the patient follows. My understanding of working with trauma is having the client lead while empowering them to get to where they want to go. How would you say this approach is different? Yes, that is different. So for me, models 1 to 4 about patient leads, we follow. And they will indeed talk about their trauma, we follow. And a la Judy Herman, we are listening and witnessing. We're bearing witness to the pain as they relive it and the trauma and the horror of it. And that's what we do. We lend our empathic, attuned presence. So absolutely, patient starts to talk about it. They lead when they're ready. That was my training. That's what I did for years. Yep, they lead, we follow. But then I get it. So these short-term intensive folks who are actually even willing to have their sessions videotaped. I mean, I don't know any psychoanalysts, and certainly not me, who are willing to have our sessions videotaped. Are you kidding? Hey, no, it's very private. It's very personal. We don't do stuff like that. It's also so slow moving. It's like sitting in the grass and watching it grow or something. The psychoanalytic stuff, but it's broad based and it's all sorts of good stuff. I've done it for years. I've gotten a lot of patients a lot better. But so model 4, the patient leads, we follow. In model 5, well, it's together we do it. The patient will signal signal in some way, my God, already, I want to get a handle on this. Or we're saying like, my God, enough already. Do you think maybe we need to? So then we sort of shift to model 5. And yes, I'll be more directive, like, all right, already. Then sort of like, let's do something. And there have been times when I've actually been able to sort of say, my God, something. And then something sort of comes clear to them that had not prior to that been clear. So together we co-create. The patient leads, I lead, but I'm more likely to be more directive. Those short-term intensive folks, they're more directive. They say stuff, they do stuff, they say, well, so, ba, 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 ba. And what about ba, 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 ba? They're ever busy leading and directing. And that was not my training, but I've learned that, quite frankly, it can be a little effective. I've also learned that what I can do now sometimes is I would say to a patient, only some of them, I'll say to the patient, how would you like to use your time in here today? I didn't used to say stuff like that, but how would you like to use it today? And then at the end, I follow up with 2 questions. I go, do you feel that you used your time in the way that you would have wanted to? Not in the way that you wanted to, in the way that you would, under the best of all possible circumstances, have wanted to. So in the beginning, how would you want to use your time in here today? Maybe how do you want it, but how would you want to use your time in here today? Either one would work. And at the end, do you feel that you used it in the way that you would have wanted to? And then I will say, what are your takeaways? I don't always do that. I don't do that with everybody. With many people, it doesn't even begin to be necessary. But with some of them, to sort of facilitate and hasten things along, I kind of got that a little bit from, I went with the very dear Patricia Coughlin to Poland to a conference there on short-term intensive work. This was some years ago, and I was flattered to be invited. And I was sort of thinking, why don't we really do short-term intensive work? And then I remembered something like, oh my God, I do a lot of, I've done this for decades, consultations on patients that can be on, they're in treatment with somebody else, say, and the patient is sent my way, so I do a consultation. And it can last 1 session, 3 sessions, 5 sessions, or 10 sessions. And that's short-term intensive work. Do I get something done? Actually, yes, I do. And, am I rather directive? Well, yeah, I am. And do I get something done? Yes, I do. So anyway, so I had told the people organizing the conference that I was a little bit scared to travel to Poland all by myself. So they put me with Patricia Coughlin, who very generously said, oh, absolutely. She took me under her wing and we went together, and I sat with her, and she just taught me so much. And she said, by the way, they have, Jonathan Shedler and the others have found that often the most work gets done in a therapy in the first few sessions. Wow, who knew? And anyway, and so I have now stepped it up a little bit and so on. And I do work sometimes very long term with some of my patients, but on some level, I'm accompanying them on their life journey, and that's what they want. And I'm delighted to do that. And they are also evolving, as am I. I'm always changed as a result of the work that I do. Anyway, so that's that. Now I'm eyes on the time here. I don't know. I hope I answered that one. Okay, now let me get back to this good one from Manur. Okay, if memory is an illusion, is this your question? Yes, I think. Then wouldn't the whole of the psyche subjective? Oh, I answered this. Subjective, perceptive. Yeah. So Manur, do you have the question for me that you wanted to ask? Although she's not here. So wasn't there a longer question that I had put off to the end? Maybe not. Okay,
Yes,
Martha,
there was. I think Mahanur did want to ask you another question. I've unmuted her, so hopefully
oh,
she should
manure.
be able to
Oh,
ask
good.
you.
And let me just say, I'm seeing Afshin. Martha, having said that, may I say then, as per Model 5, it's more goal-directed. Yeah, yep. I didn't read that part of one of my slides. It is goal-directed, goal-oriented, solution-focused, action-oriented, problem-solving. Yes, let's do this. So yes, Model 5 is. All right, Manur, I'd love to hear from you.
Yes, you did answer most of my question, but I guess I just have this when you were talking about all the A's, which were the opposite of all the defenses, it seemed like it was sort of you talking about a timelessness state, a state which was without time, which a lot of non-dual perspectives sort of talk about. A place where there's
Oh,
sort
nice.
of endless possibility, right? So it seems like a constant exposure of the trauma and pain to that, and then that's the juxtaposition, which was sort of making sense to me while you were talking.
Oh, wait a minute.
So I just wanted
The
to know.
juxtaposition, I think that's just brilliant. I feel that there's something very wonderful in what you just said. The juxtaposition being between the R's and the A's, or between.
Ours there is, yes. It seems like there's this terrain of endless possibility, which a lot of non-dual people talk about, and esoteric traditions, and then there's the pain and trauma. And when you talk about the juxtaposition, it's constantly putting those states in front of each other so that there's some dialogue happening.
A dialogue and a
And
dialectical tension, but ultimately some kind of
yeah,
evolving
yes,
and resolution and adaptive
yes,
resolution. Yes, and
yes.
also what you just said in that brilliant thing that you just said. Boy, am I glad we saved this to the end. Let me say, it really is in essence a dialectical tension, right? Because it is more sort of fluid. Yeah, yes, thank you. It's not like, sort of, well, I have awareness now. Well, I have acceptance now. Oh my God, I had not, thank you. I had not really put that together. That in essence, from there's a dialectical tension, and the dualities and the polarities and the complementarities of without lightness, without
That's the
darkness, there
optimal
can't be
stress.
lightness. Of defense,
Yes.
the R's and the A's and the A's. That's beautiful. And then it's not like a static, like you get to sort of like, well, I'm aware now. Well, I'm accepting now. Well, I'm doing my action. It's an ongoing, continuously evolving process. And let me add one thing. Am I allowed to run over just a tad? Hiba, can I run over just a few minutes here?
Yes, yes, sure,
Oh, thank you
sure.
so much for your flexibility, if I can be so bold. All right. So anyway, all right. Somebody had to point this out to me that actually what I didn't emphasize on the slides, but I'll say it real quick, and again, I hope you guys will sign up for my spot supervision group. It is recorded. So oh, good. We get some nods there, please. Martha Stark, MD at synergymed.solutions. It's on my slides, and I just told you. All right. This dialectical tension, yes, between the R's and the A's. So again, just resistance, relentless hope, reenactment, retreat or relational absence, and refractory inertia. Inertia meaning if you've stopped, you can't get started, or if you've started and it's dysfunctional, you can't stop. That's what inertia means. It means both of those. All right. And the A's are, but it's a state of constant, continuous flux, because there isn't anything that's a noun, it's all a verb, and in a state of continuous motion. This is so exciting. Awareness, acceptance, accountability, authentic presence or accessibility, and then actualizing action. Okay, now the working through process involves an optimal stressor. In each of these 5 models, again, simplifying a little bit, but for the sake of sort of being able to kind of have it in your head. In model 1, the optimal stressor in this cognitive approach, interpretive perspective, it privileges the interpretive perspective, interpretation cognitive. The optimal stressor that is the thing that needs to be worked through is cognitive, and the word starts with a D. Does anybody know what that word would be? In model 1, cognitive, and that's at the heart of the therapeutic action. Cognitive, cognitive
Dissonance,
what?
dissonance.
Yes, Hiba. Yes. Cognitive dissonance. They're like, oh, yes. Oh, right. Yeah. We know about that in CBT and other things. Well, yeah, okay. Cognitive dissonance. Again, if you want to capture it, okay. But I'm not done yet. In model 2, what is the thing that ultimately the heart of the therapeutic action to get them from the fluid or relentless hope, relentless pursuit of the unattainable to this fluid acceptance that it was what it was and is what it is? By working through, one way to put it is positive transference disrupted. I could say that. But I want to be fancier than that. I could say optimal disillusionment, which is what psychology says. But since model 2 is an affective approach, I'm going to call it affective disillusionment. Now, I want you to notice that the first word speaks to what this category privileges, and the second word starts with a D. So cognitive dissonance, model 1. Affective disillusionment, model 2. Model 3, which is from the reenactment, compulsive and unwitting reenactment of unmastered early on relational traumas, both presence of bad and absence of good on the stage of the life and in the treatment. 2, fluidity, but more accountability for what one is on the part of both therapist and a patient as part of working through the projective identification. Now it's going to be relational, but what we're doing is, instead of as in model 2, we are adding new good by working through disillusionment, adaptively internalizing new good. Remember I said that earlier? Adaptively internalize good, whereas we defensively interject bad, right? Remember I said that? Model 2 is about adaptively internalizing good to fill in structural deficit. Model 3 is about detoxifying existent bad in the form of pathogenic interjects. And so it's a relational something. And this, you got to say it, folks. The word that starts with a D. So model 1, cognitive dissonance, the cutting edge of the therapeutic action. Model 2, affective disillusionment. Model 3, relational. D, relational. You're going to make me practically vomit my insides out. Relational. D, relational. D, relational. You're going to remember this one forever by the time I finally spit it out. Relational. Oh, dissonance there. Oh, Fizz, it got dissonance. There you go. And at 10:05, yeah, you got it. Thank you. Relational detox.
Detoxifying.
Yeah, detoxification. Exactly. Exactly. I told you she was your esteemed and fearless leader. Guess what? There she is. All right. So relational detoxification, where you modify old bad. So model 2 is add new good, and model 3 is modify old bad. But again, the languaging is different. So we're not talking as, the languaging is different for each of these, whatever. So in model 2, you're adding new good, capacity to be a good parent unto yourself and to regulate your self-esteem on your own. Okay. I mean, they're different languages. Okay. Model 1, cognitive dissonance. Model 2, affective disillusionment. Model 3, relational detoxification. Notice the D's. Model 4. Thank you, Tamina. Okay, good. I know some of you have to run for a client. Yes, thank you. But thank you for being here. All right. And your question. Okay, model 4. What is this going to be? Existential, because this is an existential approach. Remember, CARES? Existential something. And it has to be a D word. And it has to be where the cutting edge of the therapeutic action lies. So it's existential, existential
Dilemma?
A dilemma is okay. That isn't actually it, but that is good. That is good. Existential dilemma. Coming to terms with it. Yeah, I had never thought of that, but yes, that is good. That's not what I was thinking of, but that is good. Existential dilemma. Yeah, the internal dilemma about is it worth anything or not? Life, death, lightness, darkness, whatever. Yes. All right, but another one. Yes. So existential dilemma absolutely works. But now existential, this is where we foster a benign regression to we foster a benign regression. Well, dread is good. Dread has been sometimes the word I've used. Yes, existential dread. Yes, it is. Yes. Yes, I'm sort of torn. I've got some numbers of D words here. Dread is good. Dilemma I'd never even thought of. Dread is good. All right, we're going to keep going here. Existential, we want to overcome their dread, Masad Khan and also Manur, their dread of surrender to resourceless dependence, folks. Dependence. That's like pulling teeth on that one, but all right. So overcoming their dread of resources dependence. But now you're going to remember this, right? Because I'm giving you the visual along with it. And so we got it so far. Cognitive dissonance, affective disillusionment, D words, okay, relational, C-A-R-E, relational detoxification, existential dependence, existential dread, existential dilemma. Okay, now model 5, which is a synaptic, because it's a quantum neuroscientific. So it's synaptic for the neuroscientific, and superpositional for the quantum part, because there are infinite possibilities that every single moment in time holds. So that's superpositional. There's an S word. And then one of my supervisees, there's another S word. One of my students, there's another S word. Anyway, said actually shape shifting. They're like, okay, yep, shape shifting. Yeah, right. But yes, right. Shape shifting. And this is where I get to say, I am working on my model 6, and everybody says, well, I want it now. Well, it's sort of like, no, I have till 2030 because I get a decade for each model. And the 6th one is the somatic spiritual approach to evolving from at rest to awakening. There's your R word, there's your A word, the dialectical tension between. Yeah, but, and well, I want it now, they say. Well, it's sort of like I haven't created it yet. I mean, it's more in my mind. I don't have it yet. So I got 5 more years. All right, but anyway, I'm back to model 5, and then I'm going to be just about done here. So model 5, now we're going to use the word synaptic, and I have to have a D word. And so cognitive dissonance, affective disillusionment, relational detoxification, existential dependence, existential dread, existential dilemma. And model 5 is synaptic, a deconstruction. Yes. Who knew? There were a few others that I was thinking of, but deconstruction. Holy shit, because it is a constructivist model, and it is about rescripting and updating these narratives and the meaning making and the narratives that are constructed. Yeah, revisiting and reshaping and refashioning and resculpting and updating and making more relevant the narratives that are constructed. So it is a synaptic deconstruction and synaptic deconsolidation then. Okay. I should listen to myself with therapeutic memory reconsolidation. All right, well, it's even something more. And it's a word, but yes, all of those. And it's a word that I've been using all over the place. And I even put it into the prototypical Model 5 statement. So it's synaptic I'm looking in the chat. If you're too shy to say it out loud, you just put it in the chat. Synaptic all of those statements, they're a story about quantum. I'm getting a heart attack practically doing this. Let's see. Synaptic the next letter is an E. Entanglement. Thank you, Manur. Oh my God, before I have a heart attack here. Disentanglement. So thank you so much. So model 5 about synaptic deconstruction, synaptic deconsolidation, synaptic disentanglement, synaptic decoupling, but get it? Disentanglement from the toxicity of the past. So you can free up the synapses to be sort of, to be locked in, reconsolidated so that they can encode more forward thinking and more evolved and more uplifting and more reality-based narratives going forward. All right, now my final sentence, and then I am done. My final sentence is, just as you have so beautifully helped me to understand this dialectical tension, listen, Manur, you better sign up for my spot supervision group. That's a threat. All right, but anyway, this, and others of you too, by the way, these good smiles, I've seen all, and Miral too, and Fizza, and so on, and you others who are a little more quiet, but Orpha, yes, and so on. Sign up, please. All right, but anyway, so what I'm trying to get to is this dialectical tension between the R's and the A's, but the heart of the therapeutic action being working through the D's. And I didn't get this, but my student says, say, oh my God, the START method is really rad, RAD. Resistant defenses, adaptations, and optimal stressors. Your system, Martha, is rad. That's the word, right? Cool. It's maybe old-fashioned word, but it works. I'll take it. I've seen. Pleasure to learn about your models. Loved your energy. Have to rush for a session. Totally get it. And I want to just say one thing, and then I will let you all go, and I'll let myself go. I want to do this for myself. All brilliant. Thank you. I say patient, and forgive me, but the reason I say patient is and not client is, as I mentioned, my own therapy, intensive, wonderful therapy, 8 years, 3 times a week with my very dear psychoanalytic social worker. I saw myself as her patient. I wasn't on medication. As I do prescribe, I don't like medication, but every now and then I do prescribe medication for my patients, not for my clients. So I saw myself as her patient. I have an accountant, I'm his client. I go to shop at Whole Foods, I'm a customer. But for me, and I used my health insurance, medical health insurance, as a patient. So for me, I call it a patient, but we can think client. It works too, client. But I sort of like the idea of patient. And I liked being a patient. I liked being a patient. And I guess I like being a client of my accountant, although he's kind of a tight ass. And I like shopping at Whole Foods. I'm a customer. But anyway, so that's why I say patient. And thank you for bearing with me in that. And then therapist, I say. All right, well, let me just say, I love you guys. I love you guys. I knew I would because I already loved Hiba. I already loved her. She was just amazing. And a lot of people got back to me when I'd said, I can offer this here kind of training session and this and that. And quite frankly, she's the one I chose first. She's the one I chose first. And I feel so glad that I did. And that smile and you all and your smiles. Oh, thank you, thank you. And then that I get to see you all in person here is just very, very, very special for me. So this has been recorded. I'm going to be putting it on my YouTube channel or on my website, or I'll put it somewhere, but also Hiba will have it for you. And other people who weren't able to be here can listen. It's all good. It's my pleasure. And thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let me just see here. I want to make sure
Thank you
that
so much. You
everybody.
have been brilliant, and I think we've all thoroughly enjoyed it, as you can see from all the smiles. But a lot of content to take back, reflect on, sit with, work through, and implement in our everyday work that we do with our patients.
And Hiba, can I just say before you sign off, Manure, thank you so much. She said, hope your new home is 10 times better. I mean, that is so sweet. That captures it right there. And let me say, I hope you know, and again, that smile from Miral, who also liked that. Let me say, I don't just say stronger at the broken places. I, along with all of us, have dealt with over the course of our decades many experiences that were just so traumatizing and devastating, and deaths and losses. And I mean, like, nobody gets off scot-free. We all do. But the point is for us to to stand up taller, and stronger for the effort of having survived and become ever more resilient, and so on. And then, of course, at the end we die anyway. There is that. But we don't really have to be thinking about that in the moment, because none of us here is dying. So anyway, thank you so much. And you have my master spreadsheet. It's not for the faint of heart. You should check it out. Every thought that I've ever had, and even some thoughts that I haven't yet had, are on that master spreadsheet. There are 6 columns and just a lot of quotes and different colors and more than 1,000 lines. And you can access it. I will keep updating it. You can see it through my website, which is synergymed.solutions. Oh, and also let me just say, this Saturday, which is 2 days from now, I don't know what time it is for you guys. I think it's 10:20 in the morning here. What time is it for you?
It's 8:20 p.m.
Okay. So to be kind of late for you guys, but on Saturday, let me just say, I am offering it's $25. I'm sorry, somebody's hosting me, or I give it to you for free, hosting me, and it's called it's on my Model 2, and it's called Pretending That It Can Be When It Can't is How People Break Their Hearts. And then colon, and then it goes insatiable pursuit of the impossible and unrelenting outrage when thwarted. So it's about the masochistic defense of relentless hope and the sadistic defense of relentless outrage. And it's a good one. It's 2 hours. It's $25 and it's recorded. And so if you wanted to sign up, just reach out to me at my email and I'll refer you to the host and she'll sign you up. It's not too late, not too late. If you want to be on my mailing list in general, sign up. I don't mean to be pathetic or anything, but please sign up.
We will all sign up for sure.
Thank you. All right, you all have a wonderful time, and I admire all of you. The fact that you would have decided to be with your dear Hiba highlights that you all are wonderful as well. So there you go. Take care, and I guess we'll sign off now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye bye. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.